Nobody warned Emeka Okaphor that the woman he was about to marry would eat him out of house, land, and the last thread of his dignity. And by the time he understood what was truly happening, it was already too late to look away. Emeka was 34 years old, a civil engineer from Nui who had built a decent life through discipline and sacrifice. He was not wealthy by the standards of his peers, but he was comfortable. A 4-bedroom house on the quieter edge of town, a reliable Hilux, and a small construction firm that kept 6 men employed through the dry season and into the rains. He was a serious man. His mother, Mama Ngozi, had raised him to be serious. She had buried 2 husbands and raised 4 children on the proceeds of a fabric stall in Onitsha main market, and she did not tolerate softness in the people she loved. She told Emeka from childhood that a man who could not govern his household could not govern anything, and Emeka had taken those words into his bones. So when his friends began to worry about him, they did so quietly. He was 34 and unmarried. He worked too much. He cooked his own food on weekends and spent his evenings watching documentary films about infrastructure in Southeast Asia. He was fine. Everyone agreed he was fine, but there was something in his eyes at other people's weddings, a careful blankness that those who loved him recognized as longing dressed in a suit. It was at his cousin Tabena's introduction ceremony in Awka that he first saw Adaeze Nwosu. She was seated at the far end of the women's table, and she was eating. That was the first thing he noticed. Not her face, not her dress, not the way the afternoon light caught the gold thread in her wrapper. She was eating with the kind of full, unself-conscious pleasure that very few people allow themselves in public. A mound of ofo nugbu sat before her, and she was working through it with both attention and joy, using her fingers with practiced ease, her eyes half closed in what could only be described as satisfaction. There was no performance in it. She was simply a woman who was genuinely, completely happy with what was in front of her. Emeka found himself staring. His cousin Chidi elbowed him. "Close your mouth, my brother." "Who is she?" "Adaeze. She works at the state ministry in Awka. Her father is Matsi Nwosu, the one who built the new block of flats near Unizik Junction." Chidi lowered his voice, though not by much. "They say she likes to eat-o. The girl can eat." Emeka said nothing. He watched her accept a second helping without apology and laugh at something the woman beside her said, her whole body moving with the laugh, generous and unguarded. He had never seen someone so comfortable in their own skin. By the end of the evening, he had found a reason to be introduced. They spoke for 20 minutes beside the generator shed, away from the music. She was direct without being aggressive, funny without trying too hard, and when she asked him what he did, and he explained the construction firm, she asked 3 specific, intelligent questions about procurement and subcontracting that made him sit up straight. She was not performing intelligence for his benefit. She was genuinely curious. He drove home to Nui that night thinking about her. The courtship lasted 8 months. Emeka was methodical, and Adaeze was patient. And somewhere in the middle of those 8 months they fell into the kind of easy, honest intimacy that most couples spend years trying to achieve. She visited his site in Onitsha and wore flat shoes and did not complain about the mud. He visited her family compound in Equiolobia and sat through 4 hours of conversation with her father without checking his phone. They argued twice, once about money and once about his mother, and both times they resolved it before the week was out, which Emeka took as the most important sign of all. What he did not fully reckon with, in those 8 careful months, was the eating. He had seen her eat at the introduction ceremony. He had noticed it again on their 3rd outing, when she ordered the large portion at a bukka in Enugu and finished it while he was still halfway through his own. He had found it charming. He had told himself it was refreshing. A woman who was not performing restraint, who did not order salad and then steal his chips. He found it, if he was honest with himself, one of the things he loved about her. What he had not understood was the scale. They married in December, a 3-day celebration that left both families exhausted and happy. Adaeze moved into the Nui house the first week of January, and within 2 weeks, Emeka began to understand that what he had observed during courtship was not the full picture. It was the trailer. The film was something else entirely. Adaeze ate the way some people breathe, constantly, abundantly, and without apparent limit. She woke before him and had already made herself a pot of akamu with fried akra by the time he came down. She ate lunch at noon and again at 2. She cooked dinner in generous quantities and ate more than her share without guilt or acknowledgement. At 10 p.m., she would rise from beside him in bed, pad to the kitchen, and return 20 minutes later with a plate of leftover stew and rice wrapped in cellophane, which she ate in the dark while watching something on her phone. She was not secretive about it. She simply did not see it as something that required explanation or moderation. Emeka's food budget tripled in the first month. He said nothing. He told himself it was the adjustment period. New home, new environment, she would settle. He went to the market and bought more. He watched the bags of rice disappear faster than he had ever imagined a bag of rice could disappear. He watched whole chickens vanish between Thursday and Saturday. He found a pot of egusi that he had been looking forward to since Tuesday, completely empty on Wednesday morning, a fact Adaeze mentioned with a casual apology and the suggestion that they needed to buy more crayfish. By March, Emeka was keeping a private spreadsheet. He was not a petty man. He insisted on this to himself, but he was an engineer and engineers measured things. The numbers were remarkable. Adaeze was spending, between her personal eating, her purchases, and the snacks she kept in a dedicated drawer in the kitchen, approximately 60% of what he earned from the firm in an average month. And the firm was not small. He had 6 men on payroll and 3 active contracts. He was doing well. He was doing well, and somehow, between January and March, he had not managed to save a single naira. He brought it up in April. He tried to do it gently. He waited for a Sunday evening when they were both relaxed, when dinner was finished and the plates were cleared. He had learned not to try to talk to Adaeze while she was eating, because she gave him only a fraction of her attention, and he sat across from her in the sitting room and said carefully that he wanted to talk about household expenses. She listened. She did not interrupt. When he finished, she looked at him with an expression he could not immediately read and said, "Are you saying I eat too much?" He said he was saying the budget needed management. She said the budget was fine and she would look at it. Then she went to the kitchen and returned with a plate of chin-chin she had bought that afternoon and ate it while watching the evening news, and the conversation was apparently over. Nothing changed. By June, Emeka was eating at work. Not because there was no food at home. There was always food at home, in enormous quantities, because Adaeze cooked as ambitiously as she ate, but because he had begun to feel a creeping anxiety in his own kitchen, a sense of scarcity that made no rational sense given the pots on the stove, but felt real nonetheless. He was a man watching his life be consumed from the inside, and he did not know how to name it without sounding ridiculous, because the house was full of food and his wife was happy and healthy and had recently been promoted at the ministry, and none of it, on the surface, looked like a problem. He called his friend Obinna in July. Obinna was the kind of friend a man called when he could not call his mother. He ran a pharmacy in Onitsha and had been married for 11 years to a woman everyone agreed was too good for him, and he had learned over those 11 years to listen without judgment. Emeka explained the situation in careful, measured terms, and Obinna listened all the way to the end and then said, "Emeka, my brother, has it occurred to you that your wife might have a medical condition?" Emeka was quiet for a long moment. He had not, in 6 months of spreadsheets and silent frustration, considered this. He went home that evening and looked at Adaeze differently. Not with suspicion, but with attention, the kind of attention he had given her in Oka when he first watched her eat, except this time he was not charmed, he was studying. He watched her move through the kitchen. He watched the rhythm of it, the way she reached for food not always when he would have expected hunger, the way she sometimes seemed to be eating without tasting, automatically, the hand going to the plate and the mouth receiving, and the eyes elsewhere, distant, somewhere he could not reach. He asked her, that night, quietly, whether she was all right. She looked up from her plate. "I'm fine." "Why?" "You seem, I don't know. Sometimes you seem far away." Something moved across her face that he almost missed. It was gone before he could name it, replaced by the easy smile he knew well. "I'm just tired from work," she said. The minister has been impossible. But Emeka had seen it. That flicker. That almost thing. He began to pay a different kind of attention. What he put together over the following weeks was not a clear picture. It was more like a mosaic assembled from fragments he had not known were related. Adaeze had lost her younger sister, Chioma, 3 years before they met. A road accident on the Onitsha-Owerri expressway. She had mentioned it once, briefly, early in their courtship, in the way people mention catastrophic things when they want to acknowledge them without opening the door fully. He had held her hand and moved on because she had moved on, and he had taken her cue. But now he remembered other things. The way she sometimes cooked Chioma's favorite foods on no particular occasion. The way she went quiet on certain dates. The way she once, coming home from Equilobia after visiting her family, had gone directly to the kitchen and stood there for 40 minutes before he realized she wasn't cooking. She was standing at the stove with nothing on it, her hands flat on the counter, her eyes on the window. He remembered Obina's question. "Has it occurred to you that your wife might have a medical condition?" He thought about it differently now. Not a physical condition. Something else. He raised it with her on a Tuesday night, 3 weeks before their first anniversary. He did not approach it through the budget or the spreadsheet. He sat beside her on the bed, and he said, "I want to talk about Chioma." Adaeze went very still. "I don't need you to explain anything," Emeka said. "I just want you to know that I've been watching you, and I think you're carrying something very heavy, and I think it's been easier to carry it in the kitchen than to put it down and look at it." The silence that followed lasted so long that he began to wonder if he had misread everything. Then Adaeze put her face in her hands, and her shoulders shook, and she wept in a way he had never seen her weep. Not the quick, manageable tears of frustration or tiredness, but something deeper, something that had been stored under pressure for a long time and was now, finally, releasing. She wept for a long time. He did not speak. He put his hand on her back and stayed. What came out that night, in pieces and fragments, was this. Adaeze and Chioma had been inseparable. Not just sisters, best friends, confidants, the kind of pair that other people found slightly intimidating in their completeness. After Chioma died, Adaeze had not known how to grieve in a way that other people could see. She was the strong one. She was the firstborn. Her parents needed her intact. So she had folded the grief into something private and carried it. And somewhere in those 3 years the eating had become the container for everything she could not say. It was not hunger. It had never been hunger. It was the specific, terrible comfort of sensation when the mind is too loud. The way food occupied the present moment and gave the body something to do while the heart did its work underground. She had not, she said, meant to hide it from him. She had not even entirely known it herself. Emeka listened to all of it. Then he said, "We are going to find someone for you to talk to. Not because something is wrong with you. Because you lost someone and you deserve to grieve properly, and I want to be with you while you do it." This, it turned out, was what his wife had needed to hear for 3 years. The months that followed were not easy. Grief that has been stored does not come out neatly. Adaeze began seeing a counselor in Awka, a quiet woman named Dr. Obi who had studied grief therapy in London and returned home because she said Nigeria needed her more. There were weeks when Adaeze was more difficult to live with than she had been before. More emotional, less contained, more likely to cry over small things, which she found embarrassing and Emeka found, without quite being able to explain it, a relief. She was present. She was in the room. She was not somewhere behind glass. The eating shifted gradually. Not disappeared. Adaeze remained, and always would remain, a woman who loved food with serious and genuine passion, and Emeka had long since made his peace with the grocery bills. but the compulsive, automatic quality began to soften. She started cooking with more intention, less urgency. She began to talk about Chioma directly, using her name, telling stories. She cooked Chioma's favorite oaf akwu on her birthday in September and invited both their families and told them this was what they were doing now, every year, because Chioma deserved to be remembered with full plates and noise. Mama Ngozi, who had said nothing during the difficult months except occasional pointed observations about the state of the kerosene budget, attended the birthday dinner and ate 3 helpings and told Adaeze that she had done a good thing. Emeka, watching his mother say this, understood that he had married exactly the right person. On their first anniversary, he took Adaeze back to Awka, to the same restaurant near the Tebena family compound where they had first properly spoken. He ordered what she ordered and did not comment on the portion size, and she laughed at this, understanding exactly what he was doing. "You were staring at me that first day," she said. "I was," he admitted. "Everyone always stares. They stare because they've forgotten how to want things out loud," he said. "You never forgot." She looked at him across the table with the expression he had come to know as the real one. Not the easy smile, not the social composure, but the open, unguarded face she showed only when she was completely at ease. "You know," she said, "most men would have just complained to their friends and become bitter. I have better friends than that," he said. She reached across and took a piece of meat from his plate without asking, which was for both of them a kind of private language, a shorthand for ease, for safety, for the particular intimacy of people who have agreed to know each other fully. He let her have it. And if you've been nodding along to this story, wondering how many people you know who are carrying something they can't name in the only way that feels bearable, share this with someone who needs it. And if you haven't yet, subscribe, because the stories we tell here are always about the things that matter underneath the things that seem to matter. We'll see you in the next one.